Welcome to Unholy Inquiry, where each tale leads you deeper into a labyrinth of mystery waiting to be uncovered. This time, join us as we delve into Hercule Poirot and The Hour Before the Last Knock, a fan-crafted story that pays homage to the genius and sophistication of Agatha Christie's iconic detective, Hercule Poirot. We are thrilled to have you with us on this captivating journey. Share your thoughts, let us know where you're tuning in from, and if you spot any details we missed, your feedback is invaluable. Together, let's continue to shape even more thrilling enigmas. Chapter 1. The clock strikes 13. A scream pierced the stillness of the night, high and piercing, echoing through the shadowy corridors of Everwood Manor, a sound so raw it could send shivers down the spine of anyone within earshot. Caught in the grip of dread, Hercule Poirot, with his meticulously groomed mustache and fastidious demeanor, stood frozen just outside the imposing study door, a single candle illuminating his path and casting wavering shadows across the polished floor. The invitation had promised an evening of revelry, yet it had instead birthed an unspeakable horror. For within this very room, where laughter should have reigned, a man lay dead. As thunder rumbled ominously in the distance, electrical tension gripped the air. Poirot pursed his lips and took a measured step towards the door, its heavy wood imbued with promises of both secrets and lies. At his side, Miss Agatha Larkin, an acquaintance forged in the fires of mutual curiosity, stood gasping in horror just before him. Her eyes widened, revealing a profound fear that transformed her familiar round face into a canvas of panic. "Who could have done this?" she murmured, her voice hushed, as if the walls themselves could betray her. The room beyond was dimly lit by the flickering gaslight that danced alongside the shadows of its furniture, and Poirot pushed the door open with deliberate care. A sight to freeze. Blood awaited him. Victor Chalmers, the host of the ill-fated gathering, reclined lifelessly in his study chair. A letter opener, stained crimson, lay grotesquely upon the ground, its blade glistening ominously amid an expanding pool of blood. No signs of struggle marred the pristine room, no broken glass or overturned furniture, just the scent of fear lingering in the air like a ghost. "The door was locked," Agatha whispered, as if trying to convince herself of the truth, her gaze darting to the heavy oak structure behind them. Poirot leaned closer, his eyes narrowing as he examined the position of the body, the slight slackness of Chalmers's jaw, the pallor of his skin that spoke of the violence that had been inflicted moments before. Something fell from the desk, landing with a soft thud, a small velvet pouch, half open, its silver contents catching the light. Poirot's mind ignited. The clues were beginning to weave a web. "I would not touch that, my dear," he cautioned gently, motioning for Agatha to stay back, their fascination now overtaken by the gravity of the situation. "We must think, calm our minds, yes? This is but the beginning of our inquiry." He noted how her hands trembled as he reached for the pouch, carefully extracting its contents. Two ornate cufflinks, one gleaming with the unmistakable insignia of the Chalmers family, a simple family crest, yet the other bore an unusual, intricate engraving that Poirot did not recognize. From the corner of his eye, he saw Gregor Phelps, a shadowy and nervous man, Chalmers's business associate, hovering near the doorway, his expression caught between horror and measured resolve. "Are we to call the police?" he stammered, wiping his clammy palms against his trousers, goosebumps rising along his arms. Poirot regarded Gregor, his brows furrowed in concentration. "Mon ami, there is no reason for a summons just yet. We are all men of intelligence here, yes? What does it tell us that Mr. Chalmers was murdered in a locked room, and near him the telltale signs of a struggle, yet nothing disturbed?" He turned, his gaze piercing into Gregor's fear-etched features. "What do you know of the cufflinks?" Gregor fidgeted, glancing about as though searching for an escape. Those are common enough. Victor had a penchant for them," he muttered hastily, the sheen of sweat reflecting the gaslight as it dripped from his brow. "But that one," he pointed, quaking slightly, "that one was not his. I swear it. And yet, it is found here, among his belongings," Poirot interjected smoothly, his little grey cells coiling tightly around the rising tension. "What of the party? Were there any among you who might wish harm upon him? Finances, perhaps?" An involuntary gasp escaped from Agatha as she steered clear of the growing storm. "Surely none of us would want—" "Yet, I remind you, my dear," Poirot said, his voice calm, yet resonating with a steely undercurrent, "fear can drive the most temperate of souls to unspeakable actions. And what of your own fear, Miss Larkin? A sudden unease since arriving here? Surely an invitation from Chalmers would be a cause for celebration, not dread." Something flickered behind Agatha's eyes. Was it guilt? A shadow stretched across her face as she quelled her emotions in the light of Poirot's scrutiny. She hesitated, her breath hitching. I was concerned about Victor's dealings, yes. Rumors in London, whispers of a scandal. But before Poirot could probe further, a crash sounded from the hallway, a violent shattering that sent pulses of alarm through the assembled guests clustered in the doorway. Poirot turned sharply, his heart racing. A heavy portrait swung loose from the wall, its glass splintering across the floor, scattering like unspoken words. Among the gasping guests, a woman clad in an emerald gown stepped back, eyes wide as if caught in a web of deceit. With his brow knitted in thought, Poirot was on the brink of piecing together the jigsaw. Yet from the shadows, another scream rang out, this time shrill and unearthly, curdling the blood in Poirot's veins. "No, don't go in there," cried a voice, and Poirot wheeled back just in time to see Gregor lunge forward. But it was too late. The study door swung open on its own accord, revealing glimpses of darkness beyond, as the wind howled through the crack, carrying an ominous whisper that chilled even the bravest of hearts. "Out! Get out!" cried someone. The chaos exploded, voices mingling with panic as light flickered and dimmed, and Poirot felt a dreadful certainty wash over him. The secrets of Everwood Manor were not done revealing themselves. A net of danger tightened around the company. The clock struck 13, ominously heralding a dark hour with unfinished tales yet to unfold. Chapter 2. An invitation that arrived too late. The sudden crack of glass jolted Hercule Poirot from his thoughts, his heart thundering as if it were a portent of the unfolding chaos. From the direction of the doorway, a shrill scream tore through the air, causing all heads to turn with mounting dread. Shadows danced feverishly under the flickering gaslight, the tempest outside enriching the sense of panic that gripped Everwood Manor. Poirot instinctively stepped forward, his urgency fueling the crowd's thickening anxiety, when a second sound erupted, this time an anguished cry that reverberated down the corridor like a death knell. "Someone help!" It was Miss Agatha Larkin, her voice tinged with an unrestrained fear that cut sharply through the musty air. She stood trembling at the entrance of the study, where Victor Chalmers had lain not long ago. his life extinguished. The flutter of her dress, emerald green and shimmering like a wretched jewel in the dimness, seemed a grotesque mimicry of the life that had been stolen. "Make way," Poirot commanded with an authority that surprised even him. He surged through the cluster of startled guests, his well-crafted sense of purpose obscuring his own rising trepidation. The door to the study hung ajar, the atmosphere thick with unspoken horror. The heavy oak swung forward with a groan as he pushed it open fully, revealing a sight that twisted his gut, the once calm room now brimming with disarray. Agatha stood beside the desk, where the velvet pouch had rested just moments before, its contents now ominously scattered. "What have you done?" Poirot asked, words clipped yet urgent, eyes darting toward the glass splinters that glistened like stars fallen to earth. She clutched a crumpled letter, its edges torn, a note that had evidently been the catalyst for her disturbance. "I found this, but it came too late." Her voice quavered, almost inaudible, beneath the weight of her panic. It was addressed to Victor. "I saw it, slip from beneath the door just now." Poirot's keen gaze fell upon the note, the desperate scrawl barely legible amidst the chaos. He plucked it from her shaking fingers, the air growing thick with an electric tension as he unfolded the paper. The words, dark and foreboding, teased at the fabric of his intuition. "Time runs out, Victor. What you hide shall soon be unearthed." A chill washed over him as the implications sank in, an ominous warning, yet one that arrived too late. Who would dare betray him so acutely? He mused softly, the unanswered question intermingling with the rising unease among the assembly. Before he could continue, a light footfall broke his concentration. A figure emerged from the back of the room, silhouetted against the swirling shadows. It was Edna, the charmer's housekeeper, her usually composed demeanor shattered, fragility evident in her quavering stature. "Please," Edna spoke, her voice a mere whisper, laced with desperation. "You have to know that Victor, he had enemies, business rivals. They wanted—" "Enough," Gregor Phelps interjected sharply from the doorway, his pallor stark against the rich wood of the frame. "You'll not lay this at anyone's feet without proof." His eyes darted between Poirot and Agatha, sweat trickling down his brow. "We're not the only ones here with secrets." "Secrets, yes," Poirot replied, his instincts sharpened by the turn of the conversation. "Yet we are faced with a man dead and a note foretelling of danger. It becomes essential for us to untangle this web before the threads ensnare us all." The tension tightened like a noose as they exchanged wary glances. Poirot turned back to the note, observing the delicate script and the jagged edges that suggested a hurried departure. There was anger in the hastily penned warning. "But who would dare deliver such a message?" he murmured, chanting it like a litany, weighing each guest against a scale of suspicions. Dinner was set to commence, a lavish affair meant to celebrate a prosperous future. Now it felt like an ill-fated masquerade. As the group hovered, Poirot couldn't shake the sense that they were not merely witnesses but unwilling players in a game far beyond their comprehension. Whispers of family secrets, rumors that had flickered like embers in their conversations earlier, now loomed like specters in the darkened corners of their minds. "Perhaps," Poirot began slowly, "it would serve us well to partake in dinner as planned. In the company of each other, we may discover more of the motives hidden behind those well-concealed masks." A sardonic smile creased his lips. "And I will wager there is much to uncover from those who feign innocence. The guests shuffled reluctantly toward the dining room, unease unevenly distributed among them, stomachs knotting at the thought of breaking bread amid such palpable danger. The table's grandeur juxtaposed starkly against the recent violence, silverware gleaming beneath candlelights, soft glow mocking their clandestine fears. As Poirot seated himself, he observed the flicker of eyes glancing about, lips twitching with unspoken secrets. He could feel a storm brewing, not the kind that rumbled from the heavens outside, but one wrought from deception and unfulfilled desires. A murmur caught his ear. Mrs. Chalmers, Victor's mother, had leaned in toward her husband, whispering in a voice thick with suspicion, "Do you think he ever truly cared about the family's honor?" Poirot straightened at the remark. His interest piqued. Honor, it seemed, was a fragile ornament in this household, and his mental gears began turning rapidly, piecing together the web of disagreements and rivalries. Each dinner guest wore their own facade, but he could see cracks forming, the tight-lipped smiles betraying anxiety as every clink of the fork echoed like a cry for truth. And then, as the evening reached its zenith, a sudden uproar erupted. The lights flickered violently before plunging the room into stifling darkness, gasps mingling with the muted sounds of chairs scraping against the floor. Poirot's instincts flared. The tension snapped, and a cry rang out from somewhere in the shadows, desperate and full of terror. "Stay back!" a voice shrieked, trembles radiating forth into the void, filling the air with dread. The once grand dining hall had become a cauldron of fear and suspicion under the cover of darkness, secrets swirling like smoke. Poirot's heartbeat quickened. In that moment, he understood the turning tide. Something unspeakable had begun to unfold. The hour was it a mere prelude to chaos, as terror surrounded them, wrapping tighter as they clung to each other in fear. A dread certainty washed over him, igniting the fusion of intellect and instinct. Someone here had not only taken a life, but intended to take others as well. The clock, it seemed, was ticking closer to the next chime amid the shadows, and he had to act before the darkness claimed more souls. "We must illuminate this room," Poirot declared, fueled by an urgency that breathed life into every syllable, his mind racing toward the treachery that was yet to reveal itself. But as he stepped forward to search for the lantern, a silhouette rose, enigmatic and dangerous. In that heartbeat, his heart seized. There would be no turning back now. The shadows had spoken, and a revelation awaited to be unveiled beneath the intertwining fabric of deceit. Chapter 3: The Puzzle of the Missing Heir. A blood-curdling scream shattered the thick air of Everwood Manor, echoing through the dimly lit halls like a mournful wail from an unseen spectre. Poirot, heart racing, bolted toward the source, each hurried step punctuating the silence, as dread already began to coil around him like a serpent. As he entered the expansive parlor, breaths caught in his throat. The flickering gaslights cast wild shadows on the walls, elongating the figures of the guests, huddled around a half-open door, their faces pallid and stricken with shock. "What now?" Poirot demanded, pushing through the throng with a commanding urgency that sliced through the suffocating fear. All eyes were drawn toward a solitary figure sprawled on the marbled floor, the vibrant ruby of blood stark against the cool white tiles. It was Harold Chalmers, Victor's younger brother, his face pale, eyes glazed over as if entrapped in a final nightmare. He's gone," whispered Mrs. Chalmers, her voice cracking as she stepped into the room, the solidity of her poise wavering. Gone? Poirot echoed, the word reverberating in his mind like a death knell. It struck him then, the dimming of the candelabras, the deathly stillness that followed the scream. Harold had been alive, but in that moment now, he appeared irretrievably lost. What has happened here? Poirot continued, scanning the anxious faces of the onlookers, noting the way their breaths hung heavily in the air, like thick fog, stifling and oppressive. Gregor Phelps advanced, fear etched deeply into his features. I saw him just moments ago. We were speaking of the estate, and then he gestured helplessly toward the ornate grandfather clock that ticked ominously, each chime a reminder that time was slipping away. And now he's— Silence, Poirot snapped, abruptly commanding attention. We cannot afford hysteria, my friends. Someone must find the doctor. Meanwhile, we need to ascertain how he met this fate. He knelt beside the sprawled figure, the candlelight flickering across Harold's features, and his experienced eyes scrutinized the stillness. A short, bloodied letter lay crumpled loosely in Harold's hand, an incongruous hint amid the horror. Edna, the housekeeper, her composure unraveling, rushed forward. I cannot fathom this. Harold was to inherit. He had just turned 21, she gasped, her voice a trembling thread interwoven with fear. What will happen to the estate? Who will maintain the family? Focus, Edna, Poirot commanded, his voice low and insistent as he looped in her distraction with keen observation. He has enemies, yes, but think also of the family ties. Inheritance brings greed as well as love. Secrets often hide behind a veil of affection. As he extracted the crumpled letter from Harold's fingers, Poirot unfolded it delicately. A few hastily penned words leaped to life before his eyes. You are not the only heir, dear brother. Come to the garden, tonight. Discover your true place, if you dare. The ink was smudged, perhaps a sign of a struggle, or merely the anxiety of the writer. What is that? Agatha's voice slithered from among the crowd, excitement threading through her dread. She stepped closer, peering at the letter. Her emerald gown clung to her frame like a spectre's gown, glistening ominously as though mocking the grave seriousness of their situation. Harold spoke of a mystery concerning the estate. He said there were heirs, hidden from view. So it appears, Poirot mused, annoyance pricking at the edges of his mind. Yet, does this haunt the family alone, or does it extend beyond those present? He paid no heed to the tremors in Edna's hands as he continued his investigation, utilizing his little grey cells. Would the urgency of his last moments speak of the bond, or a betrayal? As tensions mounted, Poirot realized there were rumblings beneath the surface, whispers threading between familial affection and avarice. We must ask the others. Where were you all? He surveyed the crowd once more, intense scrutiny amplifying the chilling weight of suspicion. Among them, Mrs. Chalmers clutched her pearls tightly, her knuckles as white as the frosty night outside. We were setting the table for dinner, she interjected sharply, her eyes darting to her husband, whose brow cast deeply with furrows of both grief and concern. But what business is that of yours, detective? Business, my dear, is the means by which we grasp truths. Poirot's gaze settled on Gregor, who shifted uncomfortably. Tell me about the garden meeting. When was it to take place? And might there be another heir alive? Who stands to gain? His words trailed off, the implications burgeoning ominously into the ether. I've heard rumors, Gregor muttered, glancing toward Agatha as if understanding something unspoken. But there's talk of a long-lost cousin, a woman, or perhaps even another brother. People say Victor, He had quite the history. Poirot's heart quickened. The pieces of the puzzle were blending into chaotic artistry. The manor, it seemed, was steeped not merely in ghostly whispers, but youthful rebels hiding from their pasts. So, dear friends, it seems we are not alone in our sorrow tonight. The legacy of Everwood Manor may hold secrets darker than shadows, he announced, his eyes locking onto Agatha's and then Gregor's, dissecting their subtle shifts in expression. Suddenly, another scream shattered the air, scaling the walls and igniting a fire of dread among the assembly. "The window! Look!" someone cried, pointing toward a rapidly flapping curtain that danced like the frenzied heartbeat of the storm outside. Poirot's breath caught in his throat. The window had been left ajar, and through it a figure was slipping away, anxiety mingled with urgency in their actions. "Stop!" Poirot shouted, lunging forward as footsteps hurriedly retreated. The silhouette paused for just a heartbeat, a glimpse of a hat, a coat swirling like smoke, and then vanished into the night, an escape into the storm, leaving behind a trail of questions heavier than lead. As he strained against the chaos that burgeoned within the gathered crowd, Poirot felt the weight of destiny pressing down. Someone, another heir, had just made a desperate bid for freedom, entwining their fate with his own urgent quest for truth. Within the heaving heart of Everwood Manor, a malignant puzzle had only begun to unfurl. Chapter 4. The Will That Was Never Signed. A scream cut through the air, sharp and shrill, echoing like a ghost's lament through the shadow-drenched corridors of Everwood Manor. Poirot sprang to his feet, heart pounding, as he dashed toward the parlor where the last remnants of warmth had fled, leaving behind only a vacuum filled with dread. As he entered, the sight before him clawed at his very core, a frenzied tableau of horror where the flickering candles cast trembling shadows on faces, twisted with terror. In the center, Agatha cradled a tattered document with trembling fingers, her other hand pressed to her mouth as though to stifle a scream that would shatter whatever remained of their fragile resolve. "What is this? What has occurred?" Poirot's voice sliced through the tension, but it faltered as a dark weight loomed over him. The crestfallen expressions surrounding the room confirmed a dread he already sensed. A deadly revelation was inching closer. With a deep breath, Agatha unfurled the crumpled papers, revealing a will, but not the one expected. It appeared to be an earlier version, one that should have been discarded and forgotten. This is from last year," she gasped, eyes wide with astonishment. "But it was never signed. It is illegitimate." She let the implication drop, her voice steeped in disbelief. "Illegitimate, yes, but what does it contain?" Poirot's eyes narrowed, the gears of his mind spinning rapidly. He took a step closer, drawn to the mystery of those inked lines that betrayed a hidden power struggle. He could sense the shifting allegiances around him, like the tremors of an earthquake just below the surface, waiting to erupt. A glance across the room revealed Mrs. Chalmers, her face a mask of tumultuous conflict, fury wavering behind the frozen veneer of polite despair, an expression that suggested she had known far more than she let on. "This is nonsense, Agatha. Why do you bring us more complications?" she snapped, her voice dripping with an irate chill. "Hush, Mother," Victor interjected sharply, stepping forward, his face stormy. "This document cannot simply be ignored. If it speaks the truth, we may have enemies among us, waiting to seize what is rightfully ours." "Rightfully? Tonight, Harold lies dead, and you speak of inheritances. Edna interjected, her voice quaking. She looked frightened and guilty, as though she bore the weight of unuttered secrets. We should be grieving, not squabbling over this wretched scribble. Who even penned it? Presumptions on your part do not absolve you of your responsibilities, Edna, Poirot replied coolly, his attention now fixed on the will. Your evident emotion is duly noted, yet perhaps our focus must remain on who stands to gain the most from a lack of clarity. He gestured toward the document, illuminated by the faint gaslight, now flickering dangerously as a storm raged on outside. To ascertain whether this will is genuine or forged, we must consider the implications. Who would benefit most should its contents unveil a false legacy? At that moment, Gregor stepped forward, a pallor afflicting his visage, mirroring a profound conflict. I had heard whispers of a second heir, he muttered, eyes darting nervously from Poirot's gaze to the will. Yet to suggest one could usurp Harold's lineage, it could have driven someone to act, perhaps even to draw blades in the dark of this very night. Or it could drive them to commit murder, Poirot said, his voice low, each word dripping with portentous significance. The will may reveal a lost promise. It brings hidden rivalries into brighter light, rekindling avarice as easily as it ignites despair. The estate must remain within the Chalmers bloodline. That is the family's wish, protested Victor hastily. How could anyone threaten this? We are bound by honor. We cannot forget that, can we? His words hung in the air, suffocating amid the weight of uncertainty, and Poirot observed, the cracks forming in their collective facade. Honor was a mere illusion, frayed by betrayal. The quaking resolve among the clan that had once seemed united was now threatening to fracture. And you would stake your honor on documents not validated? On unverified claims, Victor? Poirot challenged, his voice sharp as a dagger. Perhaps it is you who fears the truth most keenly. Family loyalty often tastes bitter in the throat when greed is at stake. As he scanned the room, Poirot found Mrs. Chalmers pale and agitated, shifting toward the door, her posture betraying a desire to flee. Edna had recoiled slightly, as keys to the past etched horror across her features. The logical unraveling was before him, and yet threads of emotion braided tightly, family ties marked by darker shades of betrayal. "This is madness," Mrs. Chalmers exclaimed. "You dare insinuate that my family could... descendants from an unknown rogue? This paper does not hold the value of my son's blood." In a flash, Poirot recalled Agatha's earlier outburst. "We are heirs, they are not." And something clicked. Need I remind you, dear lady, that blood alone does not define legacy? Pure claims lose their merit when entangled with deceit and the ashes of grudges. Taking the will, Poirot examined the ink scrawl closely under the gaslight, the familiar strokes of handwriting forming an unsettling knot in his stomach. With each word, a profound realization settled over him, mutating the suspicion into a palpable urgency. "This signature, I know it," he murmured. Just then, a crash resounded from the window, shattering glass, raining like icicles upon the cold marble floor. The gathered group turned, eyes wide with terror, as a shadowy figure lurked near the threshold, permitting only a fleeting glance before disappearing into the darkened night. Poirot felt his heart lurch. "Stop! No!" he bellowed, but the figure was gone too quickly. Panic spiraled as whispers erupted within the parlor, transformed into a tempest of accusations ricocheting off the walls. At that instant, Poirot's keen, razor-like mind flicked back to the will, an unguarded secret, now in the hands of a fleeing ghost. Realization struck. The truth lay hidden in the vortex of secrets, still waiting to be unearthed within the depths of Everwood Manor. The night had claimed yet another mystery, enshrouding him in its enigmatic embrace, pushing the intricate web of lies further into the labyrinth of family discord, leaving only a faint scent of betrayal lingering like smoke in his nostrils. Chapter 5. A Server of Secrets. "Drop that! You don't know what you're tampering with!" The shout rang through the dimly lit kitchen, a somber place where shadows seemed to writhe against the flickering gaslight. In a swift motion, the butler, a stooped figure draped in solemn black, attempted to wrench a crumpled piece of paper from the hands of a young kitchen maid, her eyes wide with surprise and horror. It unfolded in a cacophony of accusations and fears that echoed ominously through the very walls of Everwood Manor. "Mr. Hargrove, I only wanted to—" she stammered, her voice trembling under the weight of his fierce gaze. "I thought—" "Thought what? That secrets would shelter you. You are playing a dangerous game," he whispered, his voice a harsh rasp in the oppressive air. The storm outside had amplified, torrents of rain crashing against the window, as if to drown out the secrets simmering within. With a sudden twist of fate, Poirot, having made his way through the maze of gloomy halls, burst into the kitchen, drawn by the commotion. The tableau seized his attention immediately, the butler's gaunt features etched with urgency, the maid frozen between fear and courage, and crumpled paper, a haphazard vessel of potential revelations, held possessively in her grip. "What have we here?" Poirot's presence filled the space, every inch of him a blend of authority and astute curiosity. His eyes alighted on the paper, the corner still pressed between the maid's fingers. "Ah, I can see the urgency is palpable, non? Yet I must know what secrets elude us." The maid, emboldened by Poirot's commanding aura, slowly released the document. Hargrove's eyes flared with a mixture of alarm and anger as the paper fluttered onto the counter. Quietly, Poirot approached, the sound of rain barely a whisper against his acute hearing. "What is it?" the butler barked, his facade of calm wavering, eyes darting back and forth between the detective and the maid. "You mustn't pry. This doesn't concern you, Poirot." "Oh, I beg to differ," Poirot replied coolly, his eyes settling on the paper. With deft fingers, he picked it up and examined its content. "Is it not all too obvious? The tone suggests desperation, almost as if penned under duress. A letter, perhaps, crying for justice?" He chuckled softly, a hint of contempt in his voice. "You see, regarding the death of Mr. Harold, I suspect much has been said among these very walls, and now it appears secrets whisper louder than the storm." Hargrove's hidden fear replaced his indignant front as he stepped forward, but Poirot's single gesture halted him mid-stride. "No more bluster, mon ami. We are not in a court where your words hold sway. This is a matter of discovery, truth above all." Eyes aglow with determination, Poirot scrutinized the document. Vague references to meetings, discussions about inheritances, and a coded urgency that danced between the lines. Why, it speaks of a confrontation, a disagreement over claims that went far beyond the ordinary. "Tell me, dear Hargrove, could you possibly clarify the events of last night?" Silence stretched, the air thick with tension. I was in the study, sir," the butler replied, his bravado crumbling. "Taking my supper. I saw no one until the scream shattered the evening. A disturbance that brought everyone running. "Ah, but we are all in a great theatre of shadows, are we not?" Poirot mused, circling the kitchen like a predator stalking its prey. "The very essence of this household is riddled with secrets. And yet, why do you tremble, Hargrove? Surely you have nothing to hide." "Let's not cast unkind shadows on a devoted servant," Mrs. Chalmers interjected, gliding into the room like a spectre from the past, her voice silken but steeped with venomous undertones. "Hargrove is trusted. He has been with us through everything, and there's no need to sour the air further." Poirot turned his gaze to the lady, feigning a nonchalance, while his mind whirled. "Madame, the trust often disguises resentment. A servant's heart can hold more mysteries than any locked drawer." He watched as a flicker of annoyance pranced across her finely painted facade, revealing a crack in her carefully cultivated poise. "Tell me then, where were you when the window shattered? When figures slipped into the storm-laden night?" Mrs. Chalmers faltered, then regained control, her composure brittle. "I was with my family. We were, of course, in the parlor, recoiling from the very fright of it all." "But what of the fragment of paper here?" Poirot pressed, his perceptive nature refusing to let the matter rest. "Is it not suggestive of an altercation? Perhaps a bargaining of wills where loyalties are mislaid?" "That's preposterous," Mrs. Chalmers said sharply. Her voice trembled, revealing the raw edge beneath. "Hargrove, what have you done?" "Done? Nothing, madame, but I cannot say the same for others." The butler's eyes flashed, edging toward outrage. "I serve in silence, but loyalty breeds discontent where deceit mingles with blood. I know things, what I saw last night." "What did you see?" Poirot pressed him, sensing the impending revelation like a taut string, ready to snap. "Two figures. You saw them too, didn't you, my lady?" Hargrove turned pleadingly to Mrs. Chalmers, who shifted beneath his gaze like a trapped animal. "I swear it was nothing I could decipher, but they spoke of betrayal, of bloodlines, of inheritances, and then they fell silent." "An irritated squabble, perhaps?" Poirot's voice softened. "Or did we perhaps witness something filthier? A revelation dodged by the very shadows that haunt this manor?" In that moment, a hushed rustle came from the dim doorway, the glint of a blade, a knife, sharp and glistening in the gaslight, struck through the tension, held aloft by a looming shadow. With one swift motion, Hargrove reached for the maid, yet the knife clattered to the floor, shocking them into a silent tableau of horror. Poirot stood frozen, eyes pinning the intruder. This, mon ami, is where we uncover the real truths. The figure, cloaked yet bare of identity, swayed backward, eyes wide with terror, as the ramifications swept through the group like wildfire. Poirot's heart raced. The electric pulse of danger emboldened him. Their facade of separation was about to unfurl, taking with it the very ground upon which loyalties had stood firm. "Do not flee. Stand where you are," Poirot commanded, the weight of his voice enlivening the chaos that now threatened to tear through their very souls. "It is time we understand what shadows linger here within Everwood Manor, and what haunted truths hide behind every facade." As the figure turned, the storm outside met the tempest within. Truth blurred with treachery as friendships hung by threads, and the night itself seemed to whisper dark truths to those daring enough to listen. With each moment hanging thick with anticipation, Poirot felt the pulse of the mystery quicken, the real game of survival taking root in the depths of darkened hearts. Chapter 6. The House Where Shadows Whisper A shriek pierced the stillness, intertwining with the furious crackle of thunder, as the light in the library flickered violently overhead. Poirot's instinct kicked into overdrive, and he dashed across the carpeted expanse, heart pumping against the cold grip of dread that tightened within him. The ear-splitting noise had come from the direction of a rotting bookshelf, and he found his pulse quickening as he approached the source, feeling the weight of anticipation thickening the very air around him. Unreachable shadows boiled in the corners of the room, each flicker of candlelight displaying an ominous dance over the leather-bound spines. Poirot grasped the edge of the shelf to steady himself, eyeing the faint lightest curl of smoke that drifted lazily from its base, the scent acrid and foreign. His mind raced, piecing together the scattered fragments that lay within each echo of the storm outside. Suddenly, his fingers grazed against a strange ridge on the shelf, and he pressed down instinctively. An unexpected click reverberated through the darkened room, followed by a quiet groan as a hidden compartment swung open, barely illuminated by the dim candles. Inside lay a half-burnt letter, its edges crisped and smudged with the soot of desperation. Poirot's breath caught in his throat. Only the first few lines remained, but they were enough to thump against the walls of his mind like a heartbeat. If you do not comply, the truth shall surface, and with it, the blood of the guilty, it read, the ink coiling and curling, tainted by ineffable urgency. His mind raced. There was no doubt now that this letter contained implications, treachery stitched together long before the fateful night's events. Mon Dieu, he murmured, holding the letter as if it were a fragile bird, afraid to shatter the moment's gravity. Just then, a hesitant figure emerged from the shadows. It was Edna, the wild-haired sister of the late Harold, her eyes luminous with fear and disbelief. "Mr. Poirot, you shouldn't be here. It's not safe. You need to leave this place," she implored, her voice quaking like the storm outside. Poirot turned to regard her, intrigued as he noted the jagged stress lines etched deeply into her young face. "Edna, I believe it is you who should reconsider." He paused, letting the heaviness of his words hang in the air. "This letter? Do you recognize it?" She flinched at the mention of the letter, her features hardening as if girded against an unspoken truth. "No," she whispered, her voice strangely defiant, yet flickering under the weight of accusation looming like shadows behind her. "It's just parchment. People burn things all the time. Why would you think this connects to anything?" Poirot stepped closer, watching her closely. One mustn't be overly hasty to dismiss the weight of flames, my dear. They reveal, they destroy. What is the truth hidden under the ashes?" For a moment, Edna's defiance faltered, a flicker of uncertainty painting her features. "You think I would know? I'm hardly a keeper of secrets. I was merely upstairs, wallowing in my own grief." "Grief can disguise itself as anger, Edna. It is the darker shadow of sadness. Yet you are much too keen to turn a blind eye to peril," Poirot pressed, his tone gentle but firm. "Tell me, where were you last night, when the fragile balance of this house cracked?" Her lips twisted into a bitter smile. "In the study with the rest of my family, mourning our misfortunes. I assure you, it was nothing more than that." The explicit disdain in her eyes spun webs of unease in his gut. But before he could further dissect their tension, the crack of lightning illuminated the room, enshrouding them in an eerie glow. A low rumble followed, and in that moment they were as close as two shadows can be in the night, each hiding something unspeakable within their own hearts. And then, like the harbinger of doom, a sound, a low murmuring from deep below them. "What is that?" Edna breathed, her voice barely audible over the ferocity of the storm. The sound, faint at first, grew clearer, a musical echo of whispers curling upwards through the old manor, dragging a chill through the air. Poirot strained his ears, picking apart the noise, each syllable stark against the wooden panels of the mansion. The words were a tangled fear and despair, a disrobing of hidden truths. "It eludes me, yet it beckons as surely as the shadows." "Do," he said, eyes glinting with intrigue. "Stay close, Edna. We may yet uncover answers lurking within this house where shadows whisper." With determined steps, Poirot led the way as they ventured from the sanctity of the library, drifting cautiously toward the heart of Everwood Manor's chilling mysteries. Not far ahead lay the staircase, spiraled upwards like the coils of an ancient serpent. Each step resonated with a sense of desperation, the ominous whispers mingling with the creaks of wood beneath their feet. Just as they reached the gallery's threshold, Edna recoiled, her back snapping against the wall. "Mr. Poirot, someone is there." "What?" He spun, feeling a wave of foreboding sweep over him. Abruptly, a figure emerged from the shadows, a spectral outline against the flickering gaslight, brandishing an unmistakable presence that felt like treachery incarnate. "Leave! You must not dig further into what lies beneath." The voice was an echo, laced with a cold certainty, piercing the very core of Poirot's instincts. Without hesitation, the figure pivoted, pouring itself into the dimness, an ephemeral threat escaping their grasp. "Stay there," Poirot barked, only to find the entity slipping like sand through his fingers. The breath of the storm surged with renewed vigor, drowning out the remnants of whispers that taunted him from behind. Seconds passed like eternities, leaving him in the abyss of swift, palpable fear. Realizing their time was slipping away, Poirot turned to Edna, who stood frozen, fear clasping her throat in a tight grip. "We must follow. What lies hidden within this manor, we cannot allow it to escape." His voice rang vibrantly across the silence the storm had momentarily paused to observe. And without waiting for her reply, he took off into the shadows, chasing the specter of revelation. The storm howled its fury as Poirot raced, blood pounding in his ears, heart thundering, as if it too wished to evade what lay hidden in the recesses of Everwood Manor. The truth was out there, slipping just out of reach, but he would not rest until its whispers became screams. Chapter 7. A Whisper from the Dead. A loud crash echoed through the dimly lit corridor, followed immediately by the frantic sound of shuffling footsteps. Poirot paused mid-stride, his heart galloping as he turned sharply toward the source of the disturbance. Just as the storm unleashed its fury outside, a silhouette burst into view from the darkness, breathless, with a wild look in their eyes. It was Hargrove, the butler, his shirt damp from the downpour. "Monsieur Poirot, you must come quickly." Behind Hargrove loomed an insidious shadow, a tangible air of dread that seemed to thicken the atmosphere as he gestured frantically toward the library. "It is the journal, Harold's journal. We've discovered it, but you must hurry before it vanishes like the rest." Poirot's stomach twisted at the urgency in Hargrove's voice, recalling the letter's ominous warning and the whispers rising from the bowels of the manor. He hastened after the butler, each step resonating with the intensity of their quest. The library door swung ajar, revealing Edna, lingering at the threshold, her face pale, the remnants of fear still blazing in her deep-set eyes. "Mr. Poirot, I know what's in the journal," she murmured, her voice trembling like a wounded animal. "It could destroy everything." "Then we shall see what the truth exposes," Poirot declared, his determination mingling with an unsettling urgency. Hargrove stood aside, allowing him to enter first. The flickering candlelight cast unnatural shadows that danced ominously along the walls, and in the center of the room lay a battered leather journal, its pages half-turned, yet something sinister appeared to thrum just beneath the surface. He knelt at the journal's side, fingertips grazing the frayed edges as he lifted it cautiously. The words within spoke of family secrets that could blind even the keenest of allies. Betrayal hovered like a specter, and surreptitious dealings painted the broad strokes of deceit across those pages. "Tell me, Edna," Poirot began, unfolding the pages carefully, "what is it that could invoke such trepidation?" The room held its breath, the faint echoes of thunder stitching silence between them. "Harold wrote of his fears," Edna admitted, her voice growing steadier, masking underlying turmoil. "He feared for his life, said there were threats lingering among us, among his own family. He believed—" She trailed off, glancing at Hargrove, analyzing his reaction. "He believed someone had already taken another," Hargrove interjected, his voice firm yet urgent. "It appears our dear Harold was not just mourning his father, but was entwined in an even darker legacy than we suspected." "Then tell me, what's inscribed in those tarnished pages?" Poirot urged. "Does it name names, or is it merely a swirl of grievances?" The tension in the room thickened like a fog, pinning them under its weight. There were various names, and then— "No, wait," Edna stammered suddenly, eyes widening. "Look at the last entry. He wrote about a secret pact, a debt owed." Poirot turned to the last page, where the ink had blurred slightly, yet the desperation was unmistakable. "To stand against the current, one must acknowledge the dead," he read aloud. "This pact, it suggests blood ties, an obligation forged in the fires of familial discord." His brow furrowed as pieces of the puzzle began to take form. The storm raged on beyond the window, rattling the glass with each thunderclap. At that moment, the low murmur of voices, whispers that had echoed through the house earlier, returned in a haunting crescendo, weaving their way through the tomes and thick shadows surrounding them. Poirot felt the air pulse. "Edna, who else knew of this journal?" Her face hardened, shadowed in grief. I think only Hargrove, and possibly the others. But Harold was discreet. It was meant for our eyes only." Poirot's instincts flared. "That makes our butler indeed your greatest ally, or the most dangerous foe. Hargrove, what should you say about our late master's concerns?" But the butler's countenance wavered, frustration twisting his lips as he glanced away, silence clinging to him like a shroud. "I served him, but who am I to say? I would never betray the confidences of my employer." A cold glint of animosity flashed in Edna's eyes. "And yet, loyalty breeds suspicion, does it not?" "Enough," Poirot interjected, the intensity of his gaze pinning them in place. "Whispers haunt this manor, yet we are in the heart of it. We cannot let this journal be swept back into the shadows. Speak truth, Hargrove. Were you aware of family dynamics shifting beneath your very roof?" The butler hesitated, visibly agitated. "In truth, there were tensions, old rivalries. But one must understand, Monsieur Poirot, there is something here beyond mere family discord, things that reach into even darker abysses. darker abysses where mere shadows do not tread lightly. Poirot mused aloud, pondering Hargrove's evasiveness, the layers of fear that gnarled through all their interactions. Before he could delve deeper, the shriek of a crow echoed from outside, the sound imbued with foreboding, pulling at the thin seams of their shared truth. Suddenly, the door banged open, the wind whipping through the room, scattering papers and shifting shadows. A chill swept over them as Edna gasped. It's gone." "What?" Poirot breathed, gripping the journal tighter. "What's gone?" Her eyes darted around, panic igniting a fire in her gaze. The last page. It was ripped out. The part where Harold promised to reveal the family's darkest secret. A chill slithered down Poirot's spine as Hargrove looked between them with dismay. But how could that be? Who would have ventured in here? As if summoned by his words, the whispers flared back into prominence, louder this time, an ominous tapestry of sorrow and dread. Poirot turned abruptly, the back of his mind sensing a truth just out of grasp while the storm roared around them helplessly. "There's no time to waste. We must uncover the source of this defilement," he declared, heart pounding against the walls of his awareness. Just as he reached for the door, another crash, more terrifying than before, reverberated through the manor, sending fresh tremors through the floorboards. Then they heard it, a voice, sharp and deliberate, cutting through the echoes of the storm. "You should not have pried, Poirot. The dead do not abide by the living's will." The energy in the room shifted like the storm outside, and before Poirot could react, a shadow danced toward them, quick and curt, slipping into the realm of the unknown once again. Each breath grew heavy as the entity disappeared into the folds of darkness, leaving them ensnared in the ever-tightening coils of their own burgeoning secrets. "Follow," Poirot urged, racing toward the doorway, heart hammering, driven by the urgency of unraveling the tapestry before him, before the shadows, both hidden and, whispered, claim dominance over the truth forever. Chapter 8. The Vanishing Suspect. A scream tore through the air, so sudden and sharp that it cut through the tumult of the storm raging outside. Poirot felt his heart clench as he turned, breath catching, his instincts alerting him to a palpable danger. Hargrove, the butler, staggered back from the doorway, his face frozen in a mask of horror. In the flickering candlelight, Edna clutched at her throat, eyes wide with disbelief, as she pointed into the darkened corridor behind them. It's disappearing. Hargrove, he was right here." The tension in the air thickened, like the oppressive storm clouds swirling outside, as Poirot's thoughts spiraled into frantic calculations. "Who, Edna? Who has vanished?" Before she could respond, the flickering lights wavered, casting jittery shadows that danced with malicious intent. They were not alone. The darkness seemed to throb with secrets, and the threatening whispers that had tormented them earlier pulsed once more, rising like an urgent tide. With a swift motion, Poirot stepped into the corridor, the damp wood creaking underneath his weight as he scanned the retreating shadows. "Hargrove," he called into the void, his voice slicing through the silence that followed the inexplicable scream. When there was no response, he motioned for Edna to stay close, the stark resolve in his features illuminated by the wavering gaslight. "We must search for him. He may be in danger." Edna hesitated, her gaze flitting nervously across the dimly lit expanses of the manor's eerie architecture. "But, Monsieur Poirot, what if it is a trap? What if they want us to follow?" Panic seeped into her tone, threading with deep-seated fear as a thunderclap rumbled outside, shaking the very foundations of the manor. They may wish for us to feel that way, but we cannot let uncertainty paralyze us, Poirot pressed, his voice firm but soothing, as though he were addressing the very shadows. A man's life may be at stake. As he ventured deeper into the corridor, each step echoed ominously, reverberating against the walls, drawing out the clenched breaths that hung heavily in the air. Shadows coiled tighter around him, as if the very elements conspired to hold him back. "Over here." Edna's whisper echoed sharply, drawing his attention to a small side passage they had not noticed before, cloaked in gloom. They moved towards it cautiously, with Poirot's mind racing, his little grey cells working furiously to process their surroundings. The corridor bore the musty scent of aged wood and secrets long abandoned to time. Behind them, the library stood silent, the whispered words of the journal hanging in the air like a shroud. With a determined push, Poirot swung open the door, leading into the hidden passage, its hinges groaning in protest. The cramped space opened up to reveal a concealed room, cluttered with dusty furniture and the remnants of forgotten memories. A faint light flickered from a statement globe, illuminating a table, strewn with odd trinkets, an old tarnished mirror, a manually operated music box, and papers strewn haphazardly. At once, the smell of something akin to stale fear enveloped them. "Look," Edna gasped, her hand shaking as she pointed toward the corner, where a heavy curtain hung, slightly parted. In the dim twilight, the fabric bore distinct impressions, as if someone had been hiding behind it only moments ago. Poirot squinted into the shadows, his senses heightened. Someone has indeed been here, recently. The dust is disturbed, and these curtains are barely settling back into their place. "Do you think it could be Hargrove?" Edna asked, her voice trembling, revealing the deep-rooted anxiety that gripped her heart. "Why would he hide here?" "Why is an essential question, mademoiselle," Poirot replied, moving towards the curtain, his fingers brushing against the fabric. "To ascertain the truth of our circumstances, one must first consider motive and fear." He pulled the curtain aside, sharply, revealing nothing but a cold, empty wall behind it. But something unusual caught his attention. There, nestled in the folds of the curtain, was a letter, its corner stained with dampness and worn at the edges. Poirot carefully unfolded it, eyes darting over the elegant script that held a sense of desperation, yet offered no names or clarity. "To whom it may concern," it began, before disintegrating into paranoia-laden thoughts about betrayal and debts unpaid. The final line sent a chill racing down his spine. "Trust no one. The pact is broken." Edna peered anxiously over his shoulder. "What does it mean, Poirot? Is it connected to Harold's journal?" "Perhaps, but it also suggests a deeper undercurrent of treachery." Poirot tucked the letter into his pocket, the weight of it a tangible reminder of the secrets they had yet to uncover. "What we know is this: Hargrove may be deeply entwined in this dark tapestry." As they stepped cautiously back into the corridor, the air shifted once more, carrying a sharp chill that prickled their senses. "We must find Hargrove and bring him back," Poirot urged, his conviction hardening as they approached the intersection of the hallways. But just then, their eyes widened in horror, for another scream reverberated through the manor, this time tinged with unmistakable distress, echoing like a ghost in the tempest. "From the gallery!" Edna cried, her face pale as she grabbed his arm. "What if he is in danger?" Without hesitation, Poirot broke into a sprint, each footfall vibrating with urgency, heart racing in sync with the escalating chaos that surrounded them. As they reached the staircase, a shadow loomed at the top, silhouetted against the dim light. Poirot gasped at the sight. An unsettling figure stood poised in the darkness. "Poirot! Edna! Help!" The voice, hoarse and labored, sent a jolt through his chest, the unmistakable timbre of Hargrove. Before they could react, the shadow lunged, and the figure darted back into the black void behind the balustrade, vanishing as swiftly as it had appeared. Poirot's breath caught in his throat, the urgency of the moment sharpening his senses into crystalline clarity. "Hargrove!" he shouted, but the only response was the echo of his own desperation as the lamenting storm outside roared in defiance. Every instinct screamed for action, and Poirot took a step forward, ready to pursue when the world seemed to distort. A sudden, overarching sense of dread twined around them, unraveling the very fabric of the manor itself. "Did you see? He vanished," Edna gasped, eyes wide with disbelief. The chilling realization struck Poirot like a blow. Hargrove had been there, but in an instant he had merely melted into the shadows. The game had escalated. "There is no time for fear," Poirot commanded, resolve coiling tightly within him. He could feel the wicked fingerprints of the manor pressing in around them, heightening the stakes. If their suspect could vanish into thin air, then so could their truth. With the shadows whispering secrets and the storm crashing down around them, Poirot tightened his grip on the echoes of Hargrove's voice and plunged headlong into the darkness. The hunt just beginning, the heart of the mystery drumming to a fevered pulse that would not be ignored. Chapter 9. The trap is set. A thunderous crack rattled the windows, shaking dust from the corners and scattering the dim light of the candles, casting flickering shadows that danced like nervous spectres across the walls. Poirot's eyes widened as he stumbled upon a sight that sent an icy grip of dread through his chest. At the center of the main hall lay Hargrove, the butler, sprawled on the marble floor, his face pale and eyes wide with terror, a glimmering dagger protruding from his side. Blood pooled around him, the crimson staining the white stone like the remnants of a forgotten curse. "No!" Edna gasped behind him, a hand covering her mouth in horror, choking back a scream that trembled in her throat, threatening to escape. The storm raged outside like an angry beast, but inside an even darker presence loomed as Poirot rushed to Hargrove's side, every instinct propelling him forward. The butler's breath came in shallow gasps, a pitiful rattling sound choked by the pain, flooding his body. "Monsieur Poirot," he croaked, his voice barely more than a whisper, as blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. "It's too late. They know." "Hargrove," Poirot exclaimed, his heart racing. "Do not speak. Help is coming." He quickly pressed his hands over the wound, hoping to staunch the flow of blood. The urgency thrummed in his veins. The room had become a suspended moment in time, heavy with secrets and unseen eyes. "Edna, fetch the others," he commanded sharply, his focus unwavering. "We must call for help. Every moment counts, but do not linger near the shadows." His voice sliced through the atmosphere, thick with tension. With a curt nod, she dashed toward the main stairs, driven by adrenaline, her footsteps echoing with a hollow intent. The air was thick with fear and dread as Poirot leaned closer to Hargrove. "What do you mean, they know?" he asked, his tone soft yet probing, like a surgeon delicately extracting truth from flesh. Hargrove squeezed his eyes shut, flinching at the painful wounding of his revelation. The pact, broken. They want revenge. Who is they? Poirot pressed, the urgency of the moment clawing at him. A shifting shadow at the edge of his vision hinted at the encroachment of danger. Hargrove's breath was fading, a fragile ghost fluttering against the weight of his secrets. The journal, Poirot. If you find it, he gasped, before his voice dissipated into a choked cry, and his body went still. The weight of realization fell hard upon Poirot as he fought to swallow the mounting panic. Hargrove was lost, but in his last breath he had woven a tapestry of questions that demanded answers. It was time to set the trap. The tension unraveled and twisted in Poirot's mind, the complex strings of fate pulling taut. No sooner had Edna returned breathless with the others, marshalling them from gloom into the flickering light, than the polished surface of the marble hall felt charged with renewed energy, like the calm before a tempest. Poirot rose, collecting himself, the gleam of resolve igniting within the depths of his gaze. Ladies and gentlemen, I invite you to gather. There is much to discuss, and I assure you, the truth will soon reveal itself. Perched like a tempestuous bird, the assembled guests shifted uneasily, glancing at each other, mirroring the storm outside that raged ever louder. Their faces were marred with fear, each one marked by the adversities born from the night's harrowing events. The manor seemed to coil around them, the walls leaning in with scrupulous intent as Poirot's gaze swept over each of their expressions. We shall recount what has occurred, every detail pivotal to Hargrove's last words. Why would we stand here? Edna interjected, her voice shaking, her earlier strength now faltering. He's dead, Poirot. What could possibly remain? Quite the contrary, mademoiselle, Poirot replied sharply, a glint of determination igniting behind his serenity. The threads of this tragedy are woven together with secrets deceptively bright. To unravel them, we must first be honest with ourselves and with each other. The air was punctuated by restless murmurs, but Poirot cut through the din, his voice firm like the bullwhip of thunder above. You all are suspects now, each of you burdened by either guilt or truth. I will find the answer today, or I will let the shadows claim every last one of you. Tension crackled like static in the air as Poirot beckoned them closer, his sharp eyes evaluating them, peering into the tumult of emotions that flickered across their faces. Edna, you shall begin, he commanded, thrusting the spotlight upon the host of this chamber of secrets. The events leading to Hargrove's demise. As she stumbled through her fragmented recollections of shadows shifting, of whispered fears, Poirot observed her every slight movement, every quiver of her lip, noting with eager intensity her evasion of certain details as her voice wavered. But it was madness, Edna exclaimed, her eyes darting, betraying a desperate search for validation. You know he was acting strangely. His words spoke of treachery. It does seem odd, interjected Miller, the family lawyer, his brow furrowed, nearly swallowed by the encroaching darkness. He was deeply entwined in these affairs. Would he not have known more? All the same, Poirot insisted, weaving through their discourse, it is Hargrove's actions we must dissect, rather than merely what he speaks. The last page of the journal, what was it that could incite such fear in him? The room felt electric, the air growing heavy with unspoken accusations, every guest's eyes darting toward each other as suspicions coiled tighter. In the distance, a distant rumble of thunder echoed just as Poirot halted, a thought shimmering to the fore. Latham, he addressed the family's eccentric artist, who stood trembling near the fireplace like a trapped animal. The night of Harold's party. At what hour did you arrive? Latham's fingers fidgeted, his composure an intricate tapestry of anxiety. I don't recall precisely, he faltered, only that the storm was brewing. It grew dark. But Poirot's gaze sharpened as he leaned closer, the trap tightening. Precisely. The clouds gathered, cloaking the truth. Yet you had painted the forest just before, yes? Was there not something you kept hidden within its strokes? Suddenly, the front door banged open, revealing a silhouette cloaked in rain-soaked fabric. A figure emerged, soaked and no more distinct than a wraith. I return, the newcomer declared, breathless and stricken. The pact is restored. A shared gasp filled the hall as Poirot's heart raced, realization dawning, like the morning sun after midnight dark. Just then, with shadows slinking like phantoms, another scream shattered the air, a chorus of terror entwined with the storm's relentless fury. The trap had indeed been set, but who had ensnared whom? And as the darkness descended upon them all, Poirot knew that within the tempest, truth and fate had finally locked horns, and the game was far from over. Chapter 10. The Truth Buried in the Garden. The earth heaved in a violent upheaval as Poirot unearthed the chilling object from the drenched soil. Even the fury of the storm seemed to hush in reverent disbelief. Cradled in his trembling hands was a torn piece of crimson fabric, unmistakably part of Hargrove's waistcoat, slick with mud, yet still vibrant, glistening like a bloodstain against the rain-soaked darkness. Mon Dieu, Poirot whispered, the weight of the discovery seizing his chest like a vice. It was this fragment that had woven itself into the very fabric of this night of terror, connecting him to sinister truths, lurking just beneath the surface of the wretched garden. The thunder rumbled ominously in the distance, echoing his dread-filled thoughts. Edna's sharp intake of breath broke through the tumult of rain and wind, her eyes wide with horror as she caught sight of the fabric. "What have you found?" she gasped, stepping gingerly toward him, the shadows playing tricks in her fearful gaze. Could it be Hargrove's? Poirot rose, slowly, becoming acutely aware of her proximity, of how the tremor in her voice betrayed an uncomfortable alliance with fear. Fear that perhaps she herself was more entwined with the tragedy than she cared to admit. "Indeed it is, Mademoiselle Edna. A grave piece of evidence. Would you not agree?" He studied her, searching her face for signs of guilt, hidden delicately beneath her facade of concern. "Tell me, were you aware that he had lost this during the chaos?" I cannot say," she stammered, glancing nervously toward the dark silhouette of the manor looming behind her, watching as though it were a living omen. "We were all in disarray. It was madness." The words slipped from her lips, but the quiver in her voice suggested an unsaid understanding. Before Poirot could probe further, a rustling sound from behind the hedgerow intruded, low and furtive. The instant tension in the air thickened with palpable anxiety. Poirot motioned for silence, his intuition honed to the flickering spirits around him. "Edna, remain close. If there is danger, we cannot afford to be divided." At that moment, a figure emerged, dripping and disheveled, from the tempest's grip. It was Miller, the family lawyer, his hair plastered to his forehead and his expression twisted with anxiety. "Poirot," he called, urgency spilling forth. "There is something in the study. A letter, a warning." Edna turned sharply towards him, eyes flaring with a mix of irritation and fear. "And you thought to leave us here? What if the killer comes back?" Miller's eyes darted toward the shadowy expanse of the garden. "What if you're harmed right now? We must warn the others." His voice, though filled with a sense of urgency, trembled under the weight of the storm. Poirot assessed the two, the tensions rising like the storm clouds around them. "No, we cannot go to the others, with only speculation on our lips. What you have found here may be the fulcrum on which the truth spins." He glanced back at the sinister shape of the manor. "We must understand this first. You say you have a letter? What does it reveal?" "There's danger, Poirot. Danger lurking within these walls," Miller protested, his face turning pale as the shadows flickered. "Why risk unearthing more? You distract yourself with the mud, while the killer walks free." "Ah, but Mademoiselle Edna and I are already entwined within the shadows," Poirot offered, pointing to the crimson fabric. "We delve, and we unearth the truths buried deep, or we remain lost in the mire of fear." Yet as he held up the fragment of fabric, fresh clarity dawned, a realization biting through his mind's fog. Is it mere coincidence that this is discovered so near to Hargrove's demise, and this? Poirot's voice took on a dark urgency. "This letter you speak of, it must be tied to him. We must know the contents. What does it reveal?" Miller paused, swallowing, visibly, the tension in his jaw veering toward revelation before incurable despair. "It speaks of a hidden truth, a pact, a warning from beyond, from the party that would seek to destroy us all. Hargrove sought to protect it before ending up like this." As he spoke, Poirot's keen eyes reflected defiance against the backdrop of their heavy secret. "Then we chase shadows no longer, Monsieur Miller. Lead the way." They turned to move back toward the manor, Edna caught between them, a flicker of anxiety igniting her features. "But what if it's too late?" Thunder roared a deep reply, as if the darkness was acknowledging her trepidation. Poirot quickened his steps, sensing the heartbeat of the truth, pulsing away just beyond reach, the masterful orchestration of fate pushing them onward. With each stride back toward the darkened threshold of their gathered circle, the wind howled and the rain lashed against their bodies. A chill swept through, and Poirot's heart thudded in anticipation. Something terrible hung in the air, the kind of weight that suffocated honesty and left only deception and fear to thrive. Just then, a sudden silhouette burst through the doors of the manor. Edna froze in mid-step. "Hargrove," she murmured, yet Poirot could see it wasn't the butler before them, but a figure shrouded in shadows. Then, above a sharp gasp that wrested the air, came the terrible shock of Hargrove's voice, echoing through the waterlogged garden, yet softened, as if threatening. "You should not have come. The pact binds all too tightly." Before Poirot could comprehend the implications of the apparent resurrection, Edna's frantic cry sliced through the air. "No, it can't be." The lights inside the manor flickered, and Poirot turned sharply to see a shape, a darting shadow cutting through the room, deep in the heart of the storm that had become the catalyst for their unraveling fate. And as the cry trailed off, the ground shook, dragging the very roots of their secrets towards the surface. In that chilling moment, Poirot's mind raced, 1,000 pieces coming together like a puzzle that longed for resolution. Yet the very semblance of truth left him trembling as he commanded his intuition to discern betrayal woven into the threads of darkness. "Edna!" he shouted as the house grew silent, the echoes from Hargrove's sigh fading into a lingering menace. The storm wept around them, and as the shadows danced, Poirot knew with a certainty that the game was changing. The truth buried in the garden was ready to be unearthed, but only at a cost no one could yet fathom. Chapter 11. The confession no one heard. A scream, piercing, raw and drenched in terror, echoed through the oppressive air, and Poirot's heart stuttered in horror as he spun around, the echoes colliding with the torrential rage of the storm outside. The figure shrouded in shadows seemed to dissolve like mist in the face of Edna's shock, her hands clasped at her mouth in a futile attempt to stifle the horror that clawed at her throat. The room had dimmed dangerously under the flickering gaslights, each brief illumination casting monstrous shapes along the walls, moving like guilty souls fleeing from the truth. Poirot barely noticed the cold rain soaking his clothes as he stepped away from the door, driven by instinctive urgency. "Mademoiselle, what is it?" he demanded, his voice cutting through the wind's howl. "It's Latham," she gasped, shaking her head in disbelief. He could have seen something. I heard him just before." Her voice faltered, and she glanced toward the darkened corner of the room, where only moments ago the artist had stood. He must know. Not only Latham, but he is not the sole soul ensnared within this house, Poirot replied, surveying the gathering shadows. "We must peel back the layers of this dreadful night." The relentless tapping of rain against gabled roofs distorted reality as he extended his senses, catching the sound of hurried breaths and shifting feet nearby. Suddenly, the tension thickened palpably, a silent anticipation weaving its way through the group. Miller edged closer to Poirot, his expression fraught with anxiety. "But Poirot, if Latham knows something, we can't afford to keep playing games. Waiting is treacherous." The lightning flashed outside, illuminating the room in primal agony. Just then, a soft giggle unfurled from the shadows, cutting through the atmosphere like a cold blade. Latham appeared. His paintbrush dripped with paint, and perhaps something darker. "Waiting? Ah, you misunderstand, my dear. Friends, the waiting is the beauty of art. It is in that moment you realize how futile every stroke truly is." Each word dripped with an air of arrogance, laced with desperation, his nervous energy crackling in the air like the storm beyond. "Your creations hide a truth you dare not speak," Poirot pressed, forcing the artist to meet his penetrating gaze. "What were you trying to hide in the forest?" Latham snorted, dismissing the inquiry with a wave of his paint-smeared hand. "Mere shadows on canvas. You think you see more than what is there, Poirot. All wills shall lay bare before the storm, but does it not rain upon all equally? Us, the supposed truths?" The artist's deflection hung in the air, yet Poirot noticed the twitch of his eye, the barely contained fear transforming his bravado into a fragile guise. "We shall see what the storm has in store for us, no? It seems your brushstrokes cast shadows more than you dare acknowledge." He was on the precipice of unraveling something critical, but before he could press further, Miller's voice broke with urgency. "Aren't we wasting time? There is something in the study. I almost left it behind." His hand gripped a piece of waterlogged parchment, clutched tightly enough to whiten his knuckles. "Then let us see it," Poirot replied, his tone sharp as a knife. "Lead us, Monsieur Miller." The trio moved hesitantly toward the study, the structure creaking beneath their heavy steps, the atmosphere electric. Rain pelted against the windows, creating a drumbeat of impending doom. With every flash of lightning, the glint of metal caught Poirot's eye. The same polished letter opener lounging atop the desk, its surface gleaming with the ghosts of recent use. It struck him then that the items around them spoke in riddles woven in the dark. The moment they entered the study, Edna's gaze fell upon the parchment Miller held with an intensity that suggested more than mere curiosity. "What does it say?" she whispered, stepping closer, her eyes flickering with a mix of hope and fear. "Do you wish to read it? Or shall I?" Miller's voice quaked. Poirot pried the letter from Miller's grasp, gliding a finger along the smudged edge, moisture clinging to it, the odor of ink and dampness washing over him. In a single motion, he unfurled the note. "Ah, a warning, a pact of sorts. Listen carefully. It speaks of truths hidden deep within the family's history, secrets meant to be kept in darkness, betrayals that dance from one generation to the next." His own voice crescendoed with the hint of revelation as the atmosphere shifted, the air turning leaden with dread. Edna stepped back, clutching her side with an expression that faltered between realization and horror. "You wouldn't dare imply that?" "Indeed. What is this you hide, mademoiselle?" Poirot narrowed his eyes, letting the silence swell around them. "The truth hides deeper than you have let on. Were you not dear to Hargrove? Were there not ties?" The tension heightened, each moment stretching as she wrestled with her emotions. "You think she started, her words collapsing under the weight of a truth she struggled to untangle. A sudden crash of thunder drowned her voice, and Latham, now stricken with fury, cut in. "Enough of this charade. We are but puppets in a sick play. You and your incessant queries may unearth horrors none seek to resume." His arms flailed as he stepped forward, painting the scene with an unmistakable passion. "But you do not grasp what lies beneath, do you, Poirot? Do not mistake a ruse for wit, Latham. Your painted sorrows cannot shield you from the truth." Poirot's voice held authority, his words no longer a gentle probing, but a firm demand. "Where were you the night of Hargrove's passing?" Before Latham could retort, Edna surged forward, a wild look capturing her features. "I saw him. I heard his confession in the storm. You all misunderstood. It wasn't just Hargrove." The room fell into an uneasy silence, her admission hanging in the air, heavy with implications. Time froze around them, the storm's fury echoed and amplified by the sudden quiet that enveloped the group. In that instant, the landscape shifted beneath their feet, and Poirot's heart raced, sensing the tremors of an explosive truth waiting to erupt. "You heard something?" Poirot prompted, the urgency tinging his words with desperation. Edna swallowed hard, each breath greeting the panic swelling within her. "He spoke of secrets, a blood pact that binds more than just him." Suddenly the lights flickered again, plunging the study into darkness for a heartbeat, then returning, but not to the same scene it had been. The room was now bathed in an unnatural glow, a shadow moving with purpose against the flickering light. "Edna," Poirot's voice came softly, filled with a foreboding edge as he turned toward the movement, pain igniting within him at the realization of Latham's absence. The artist had slipped past them in the flickered chaos, and before anyone could react, an edge of the canvas hit the floor with a dull thud, revealing something hidden beneath, a bloody brush with Hargrove's name inscribed within its handle. "It's time," Latham's voice echoed from the shadows as the world tilted at a precarious angle, and Poirot felt the earth shift. All sanity trembled as he perceived the dire truth poised to unravel, a confession that threatened to upend everything. And as the rain continued to beat against the windows, a scream echoed from within the home, piercing the night anew, reverberating like a final curtain call of an enshrined tragedy yet to be fully spoken. The game had shifted, and dangerously, the end was nigh. Chapter 12. The Secret Beneath the Staircase. The very walls of the study shuddered as a blood-curdling shriek pierced the air, reverberating like a ghost's wail amidst the storm's fury. Poirot's breath caught in his throat, the sound sending a thrill of icy dread coursing through him, each echo amplifying a desperate urgency within. They had grown accustomed to fear and mystery, yet this was primal and raw, an unearthing of something far more terrifying than they had comprehended. He turned, sharply, eyes scanning the flickering shadows, the figures of Edna and Miller momentarily lost in the chaos of dashed hopes and hidden truths. "Edna," he called, forcing the urgency into his tone. But she remained transfixed, her gaze affixed to the splattered canvas where flashes of lightning unveiled a gruesome palette the artist had uncharacteristically left behind. "What did you witness?" He edged closer, his presence carving through the dread like a beacon. Behind him, Miller's voice trembled, breaking the momentary silence. "It wasn't just a scream, there was a struggle. I will go check." He reached for the door, but Poirot grasped his arm, a sharp, authoritative pull halting his flight. "Not yet, Monsieur Miller. You may wish to retreat, but we stand together. We shall face the shadows collectively." Each word dripped with the gravity of the unseen danger lurking, holding them in a precarious balance as outside the storm raged against the manor walls with a violence that threatened to tear at their very sanity. A heavy silence fell, broken only by the violent rustle of rain, and Poirot, his senses finally attuned to the suspicions unfolding, turned his attention to Edna. "Mademoiselle, what do you know? You mentioned secrets binding deeper than Hargrove." Her skin glistened under the gaslight, the flickering flames illuminating a pallor that spoke of unraveling nerves. "It was during the storm I heard voices, not just Hargrove's. Other names danced in the dark. With his, we thought we had banished the past, but—" Her words swelled with panic, spinning the fragile web of connections tighter around them. The storm was no longer just rain. It had morphed into an entity that gripped the heart of the manor, its tendrils curling around beliefs long buried. "Mademoiselle," Poirot interrupted, as fresh layers of realization folded over one another in his mind. "You fear that a bond, a pact was there, something to unearth from the shadows." "Yes," she exclaimed, the intensity of her voice crackling against the silencing backdrop of the storm. "The pact binds all, our families. It is no coincidence, Poirot." Her breathing calmed yet shuddered, indicating inner turmoil. "I should have said more. I should have told you about my father, about everything." Before Poirot could press her for clarification, Miller shouted, "Wait, what do you mean our families? Is Hargrove directly linked to you beyond mere acquaintance?" His eyes darted between them, a growing realization settling on his brow. The question lanced through Edna like a bolt of lightning. "We're bound by blood. My father, he and Hargrove were closer than I knew. Business partners in an old venture gone awry. But there was talk, much talk, that they crossed an unholy line both professionally and privately. That line ties to a secret locked away in the past." The rain pounded harder outside, mirroring the frantic tempo growing in Poirot's mind, while Latham's absence hung heavily in the room. His jovial, dark humor A crucial thread in this tapestry was now absent, creating a chasm in their understanding. Suddenly, a murmur from the shadows caught Poirot's attention. A peripheral movement. A figure, stooped low, flitting across the threshold of the study. "Did you see that?" he whispered urgently, squinting into the depths of the darkened corner. He moved with precision, past the desk, drawing closer to the archway that led into the darker recesses of the house. "Monsieur Poirot, what are you doing?" Edna's voice trembled, but he didn't turn. Before he could respond, Latham stumbled into view, paint-streaked shirt rumpled, his face pale, yet disquietingly composed, humor flickering like the dying gas flame. "Latham," he rasped, voice harsh with suppressed urgency. "You vanished, but you cannot evade the truth that lurks within these walls." "I was merely collecting inspiration," Latham murmured, the bravado in his expression growing thin against the sheer weight of the accusations swirling about the room. "Why do you question my motives, Poirot? We are but restless spirits, chasing each other in the dark." "What lies beneath the staircase, Latham?" Poirot's voice cracked like thunder, piercing the rising chaos of conflicting emotions. "Surely you know. You seem far too eager to lie." An unsettling silence enveloped them, charged with the storm's electric energy, as Latham's gaze flicked towards the ornate staircase, its stairwell lost in shadow as if guarding unspeakable truths. Underneath, Latham's laughter was a thin veneer over a crumbling facade. "Do not go digging, Poirot. Some secrets should remain buried. Wouldn't you agree?" Edna gasped, stepping back, but Poirot's intensity only sharpened. "I am merely a detective, Monsieur Latham, a seeker of truth, and your laughter now serves only to expose your fear. Why so worried about what dwells below? Would it darken your artistry?" The artist recoiled slightly, his bravado deflating like a punctured balloon, yet the moment was interrupted by a thunderous crack that echoed through the house, rattling porcelain and spirits alike. Then came the distant echo of footsteps, advancing purposefully. "Someone approaches," Poirot hissed, eyes darting to Edna, who paled further. "No, it cannot be," she stammered, retreating toward the heavy oak door, just as Miller's panic erupted, filling the space with desperate decisions. "Latham, you must tell me, where is Hargrove?" Poirot implored, as a shadow fell across the doorway, deepening with each decreasing moment of light. But Latham's face twisted, an ugly mixture of fear and fury. "You're much too late, Poirot. Some truths are destined to remain shadows, ghosts that grip the past like an iron fist." Poirot barely had time to decipher the implication when the door swung open with a loud bang, revealing a figure drenched and gaunt in the light. Hargrove. But he was not alone. A trailing shadow fluttered behind him, mouth pressed in a mirror of surprise as Latham's eyes went wide in recognition. "Violet!" The name escaped Latham's lips, colored with a mixture of wonder and despair, sending the air thick with withheld breaths. In that instant, Poirot stood frozen, awareness crashing like the storm outside. The only certainty was the sudden surge of darkness being unveiled. Hargrove and the encroaching figure. Before he could utter a word, the lights plunged into darkness, and a scream reverberated, tearing through their desperate reality and spiraling into the void, leaving only cacophony behind. The game was far from over, and as panic ignited the room, Poirot felt the iron grip of fate closing in around every entangled secret, screaming to be unearthed from beneath the staircase.